Good morning, class, and welcome to COS 201 Computer Programming 1. Now, this course will enable students to understand the fundamentals down to the intermediate level of computer programming. Now, this course is a core course for computing students, which are the computer science, software engineering, data science, information system, information technology, cyber security. So this course will enable students to be able to understand algorithms and how to be able to solve problems using basic knowledge of algorithms. So the course scope of this course is we're going to be using Python to solve our problems, and students need to understand Pythons, the indentations, the data types, the control loops, the functions, and how to be able to apply this to be able to solve problems. Like I said before, the objective of this course is to enable students to understand the basic to intermediate level of programming. Like I said, the scope is Python, and we all know that Python programming language is a high level programming language now, which can be used for different programming paradigms like the OOP, which is the object oriented programming, the functional programming, the sequential programming, and also the structured programming. Like Python programming language will be used for the practical class of this course. Like I said, algorithms will be built in order to understand the concept of not just learning how to code, but using it to solve problems. So now this is a scheme of work for this semester. So the first is introduction to computer programming. Then after that, we will look at the control and data structure using Python. So we'll look at the Python functions, how to define functions with in Python, how to define functions with arguments and functions without arguments. So we're going to understand exemption handling because as a software developer or as a software engineer, you need to understand how to apply the exemption handling in every functions you write in order to um, easily show the errors rather than the errors destroying or closing your system without notifying the users or the clients, right? Especially when you are building something like a web application or a desktop application or a mobile application using Python, it's very necessary that all your functions should always have exemption handling. So we're going to look at the introduction to object-oriented programming. We all know that the four properties of object-oriented programming is the encapsulation, the abstraction, polymorphism, and inheritance. So the student need to understand how these properties work because these properties is applied to almost all programming language that has a feature of OOP. Currently now, most of programming language have these features, this OOP feature. And where if you can understand the OOP feature here in Python, you can understand it in any language because they are all the same, right? So we have the next one we'll look at is introduction to libraries and modules. Although time will not allow us to look at so many libraries in Python, we all know that Python has vast libraries ranging from the basic um, matrix computation or mass computation to the machine learning libraries, right? Or the transformer libraries, right? So, but this class is just for computer programming one. So, we'll be looking at some simple libraries like the NumPy and the pandas in order for you to understand mass calculation using the NumPy, especially the matrix calculation, and also data manipulation using pandas. And finally, we're going to look at the final project and revision, right? Okay, so we'll look at computer programming, right? Now we all know that computer itself is dummy, right? So and computers understand zeros and one, the binary numbers, right? So humans need to pass instructions to computer in order to perform a specific task. So that because it's fast, right? If you pass an instruction to it, right, so it gives you result very fast because it's a computer. So computer programming is a process of designing and writing instructions for a computer to execute, right? So the instructions can be anything. It can be retrieving a book. It can be playing the music. It can be anything you want your computer to do, right? So, but you need to write instructions to the computer to understand what you're trying to, what to understand your tasks, right? to understand your task. So the instruction is known as code and are written in programming languages. So we have so many programming languages today which provide a way for human to communicate with machines, right? So we have so many programming language ranging from the low level to the high level programming language, which belong to the classes of programming language. And that we're going to look next. We're going to look at that next, which is the classes of programming language. So we have two classes of programming language. We have the low level programming language, and we also have the high level programming language. Now, low level programming language provide less abstraction and are closer to the machine code, so they are offering greater control over hardware and fast execution. So they are fast, right? The only disadvantage in this language is that they're very, it's not easy to read, right? It's not easy to read. It's not even easy to code, right? So examples of that is assembly language and the machine language, right? The assembly language and the machine language. As faster you can see, it provides less abstraction, right? If you learn this, I think you'll be far better programmer, right? So if you understand how to do this, it will be good for you. But these days, our focus is merely on the high level language, right? So the high level language, because it's user friendly, it's easy to read, right? It's not that it's faster, but it's still faster because even if you're running a particular task, you won't actually notice it because it gives you the return response very fast, right? So they are user friendly and are abstracted from the hardware, right? So they abstract you from mainly knowing the architecture of how the hardware works, so making it easier to write and understand. So examples of this language, the mother of all of this language is the C, right? So C is not here, although we have the C language, then we have the C++, we have the C sharp, we have the Java, we have the Objective C, which we can use now to create most of our native applications and Mac OS. Then we have the Python and Java. These two are very popular. C is popular, which is C sharp is popular, which is designed by Microsoft. So you can see all these languages have their own advantages and disadvantages, but the major advantage using this high level language is that you can actually use it to design anything, right? Ranging from your desktop applications, your mobile applications, and your web applications, right? So even if you're doing desktop application, let's assume the example of desktop application you're doing maybe is a game application, right? For Windows OS. So Python can be able to do that. Java can do that. C sharp can do that. C++ can do that. Objective C. But one of the popular language in Microsoft, one of the popular language designed by Microsoft is C sharp, which you can actually use to do anything, right? So this C sharp is very popular in game design, especially when you are using um, the Unity 3D, right, to design um, games. So C sharp is very popular. Java is also popular, right? So Python is also popular, but C sharp is very rich, right? So this language is very rich in machine learning, right? So that's why the course scope here we're going to use this, right, to start doing our programming stuff. Why? We'll give reason for doing using this. So as we move on to this lecture. Okay. Okay, now we have understood the classes of programming, right? So we need to understand variables and data type. So after this, we need to understand the implicit and explicit data type declaration. So what is a variable? A variable is like a container, right? So variable is like a container that holds a data type, right? So you can see that variable is a name storage location in programming that can hold different values during the execution of a program. So you can think of it as a container that you can fill with data, or you can change its content as needed, right? So the data type defines the kind of data that can be stored in a variable, right? That can be stored in a variable, right? So one of the popular data types that we have, right, is the integer, which make up the whole numbers. So the whole number starts from 0, 1, 42, then the negative one, and so on is is infinite, right? So Then we have the float numbers, which is the this is start with the three point can be 0.01, can be 3.14, right? So it's a decimal numbers, this float, right? So the string is alphanumeric, so it's a sequence of characters, right? It's a sequence of characters which in Python is either we're using the double, right? So using a double quote like this or the single. So we have the boolean, which is either true or false. So we also have the list and we also have the dictionary in Python, right? So list has to do with the collection of elements, right? An ordered collection of elements. So dictionary has to do with the collection of key value pairs, right? So we understand how this works. So mainly, especially when we're looking at that structure, we're going to look at mainly list and dictionary. We'll still look at tuples. We're going to look at list and dictionary because the reason is this is many of our codings we'll be writing involves this too, right? Many of going to be writing the scope of this class mainly involves using this too. So we're going to see that as time goes on. So to look at the explicit and the implicit data type declaration. Now, what is explicit and implicit? So explicit is when you manually, right? When you manually declared the data type. When you manually declare the data type, right? So that the compiler will understand, yeah, the compiler will understand the value the data type belongs to. So you can see the definition here. An explicit data type is a data type that is clearly defined and specified in programming languages. This means that the programmer explicitly, you can see this word here, explicitly declares the type of program or the type of a variable when it is created rather than allowing the language to infer it automatically, right? So let's say we have a variable called n, right? So let's say we have a variable called n. So n is holding 5. Now, a language that has to do with explicit data type, explicit data type declaration, so it won't understand what n belongs to, despite it wants to hold 5. So you need to declare that. You need to declare it can be int, right? It's int, right? So int n. So it shows that the n is an integer, which is holding an integer value, right? So that is called the implicit. So the implicit data type is one where the type of variable is determined automatically by the programming language based on the value assigned to it, right? So rather than being explicitly declared by the programmer. So let's say we have a variable called n equal 5. So we don't need to explicitly declare int, right? So once the especially Python is implicitly typed by default, right? So, but it can be you can manually explicitly declare, right? But by default is implicitly typed. So, so once we have the n equal to 5, right? So the interpreter understands that the is an integer because it's holding a int data type, right? Which is 5, right? So it's very simple to understand, right? Explicit, this is the English word explicit. We are manually declaring something, and implicit automatically, right? So this explicit and implicit, right, is just to understand the English word behind this explicit and implicit, and then you know how to define your stuff. It's very simple. So when we get to the practical next week, when we look at the practicals next week, we're going to understand this more. So this is just an introduction class, right? So next one we're going to look at is the introduction to integrated development environment. Now, it's very necessary to always understand the IDE, which is a short form for integrated development environment. I found that many students, right? So if you ask them what IDE do you use, they won't actually understand what you're trying to talk about. So IDE means the integrated development environment. So an IDE allows you to easily write a code to perform a specific task, right? It gives you that room, that environment to be able to freely write your code. And then it can be the IDE can be made for just one language, or the IDE can be made for so many language, right? So many languages. So it depends on which IDE you're using. That's what we're going to see here now. So you can see that an integrated development environment is a software application that provides comprehensive facility to computer programmers for software development, right? Or for anything, not just for although this software development Uh, we can also use IDEs for other tasks, like simple tasks, which we were doing here, and also when we say software development, right, it's comprised of the web, desktop, and the mobile applications, right? So, but we can also use it for something like data science, like the computation, right? Data science computation analysis. So we can be able to use the IDE tool for those things, especially the Visual Studio Code, right? Okay, let's move forward. Now, examples of IDEs, we're not going to look at this in details, but we're going to look at some popular IDEs we use currently, right? Especially here in Nigeria. So the first one is Visual Studio, right? Visual Studio is developed by Microsoft. Is a powerful IDE for Microsoft, widely used for .NET applications, especially C Sharp and more. We can also use it, but by default, when you are installing this, the C Sharp by default comes with it. There are some packages like the Python packages and also so many other packages when that you need to install on the Visual Studio, but it's mainly use of mainly uses C Sharp, which we can actually use to do anything, ranging from the desktop application, the mobile application using the Xamarin framework using C Sharp, and the web application, which we normally know is very popular, which we use the ASP.NET Core, right? So we also have the Eclipse. So Eclipse is an open source IDE primarily used for Java development, right? But it supports other languages through plugins. You can see the presence of all these IDEs. They normally comes with one of their main programming language, but they also support other languages, right? You can see Visual Studio comes with C Sharp, but it supports other languages, right? Then Eclipse, the same thing is primarily used for Java development, but it also supports other languages through Parliament. So we're going to look at the one of the most popular IDEs which we are going to use here in this course is the Visual Studio Code. Right. We also have the PyCharm because remember Python is a core scope, the selected programming language we'll be using here, but we know PyCharm is an IDE, right? Also from JetBrains, especially designed for Python development, offer features like code analysis and debugging, right? But we choose Visual Studio Code because it's very simple, very light, right? And it supports many languages and so many extensions, right? So we can see other frameworks here like the Android Studio, the Arrow Studio, which is basically for arrow programming, popular in data science and statistical computing, right? So we have the Visual Studio Code, which is designed by Microsoft also. So while primary a code editor, it has many extensions that allow you to function like an IDE for various languages. So we're going to use this is what we're going to use is in the next class for our practical, right? So this is what we're going to use, and Python language is a preferred language for this class, right? So note, Anaconda is not an IDE, right? Anaconda is not an IDE. Itself, rather, it is a distribution of Python and R for scientific computation and data science. Anaconda comes with a package manager called Conda, which make it easier to install and manage libraries and dependencies. So like we all know that Python is a high level language, right? So like I said before, it supports multiple programming paradigms, include which is a procedure, so structural object oriented functional programming language, right? So but basically what we're going to look at here, we're going to look at some procedure, some object oriented patterns, and also functional programming language here in this course. And you can see the features of Python is readability, is very easy to read, right? Very easy to understand, very easy to write. So versatility, right? So Python is versatile in all different types of application software, ranging from the mobile application to desktop application to web application, and they all comes it has built-in frameworks, right? They all have their own frameworks, which we're going to see here. So rich libraries, Python is one of the most popular language with rich, extensive libraries, ranging from the mass computation down to the AI um, computation, and also the transformer models, which is currently invoked now, like a generative pre-trained model, the robust optimized bidirectional encoder from transformer models, right? So now these models, we have these libraries, right? We have these libraries in Python that you can easily use to design so many stuff. So by the end of this class, we're going to be at the end of this semester, I'm going to be exposing you guys to so many things we can be able to use. We can be able to use these Python libraries for to design a completely fully automated AI application, right? Not automated manual applications anymore. So community supports, right? So we have large community supports in Python, which extensive libraries have been built almost every month. Well, I say every month or every year. So you'll be seeing so many things being built there. But another thing is, so we have the cross-platform. It means that Python can be able to run on any kind of operating systems, right? Any OS. So Python is cross-platform, it's easier to learn, it's versatile, it has rich libraries and have large community support. You can see why it's easier to start learning Python now. And the next 10, 15, I'm not seeing actually seeing Python going out, right? I'm not actually seeing because you can see that it was created by Goody Van Ronson and first released in 1991. When Python was first released, it doesn't have these properties of OOP. So with time, because of the community support, large community support, it becomes advanced and will become more advanced in the next years we look at in the next future, right? So definitely Python is not going out anytime soon. All right. So what is a framework? All right. Even if we discuss the computer programming, one is need to understand what framework is, right? So framework is a pre-built structure or set of tools that provide fundamentals for developing software applications, right? Especially for web application, most framework make use of the model view controller, where the data, right, are being modeled, right? So data are being modeled, so our functional or logical instructions are in the controller, then our view is what views the instructions or the instructions to the user, like showing the interfaces to the user, right? So like let me give for instance like the Flask framework. Flask framework actually is a model view template, right? It's not fully a model view controller. We will learn that when time comes. It's not fully a model view controller because Flask gives you the room, that's versatility to be able to uh, or, or that dynamism to be able to structure your code in a way that you want it, right? In a way that it can be easy for you to build large and complex applications, right? But this model is where we define our models, like is where we define our objects or can I say our tables. If you're using relational database model structure, where we define our tables, then we have our root where we define our logic, our functions, and also we have our template that we can be able that the user sees, right? So, but majorly, almost all frameworks now, majorly the architecture falls under this model view controller structure, right? So let's move forward. So like we said, Python is versatile. So you can see we can build different desktop applications, and these are the frameworks to use. You can choose anyone to use, right? They are all very good framework. But one of the framework here that is fab is a little bit better is Kiwi because it can be used to design desktop application and also mobile applications using Python, right? So let me for gaming also, right? For gaming, there's what other that is a library which is Pygame, right? So let me just keep this. So for the mobile, you can see Kiwi is popular open source framework for developing multi-touch application. So it supports various platforms, including the iOS and Android, right? So it is well suited for creating rich user interfaces. So robotics, so Python can be also be used to design rob to design your robot. Like we have frameworks for that, which is a Pi robot developed by Facebook area research. So Pi robot provides a simple interface for controlling robots, robotic platform, and conducting experiments with various robots. So we can also use OpenCVs and we can also use the robot operating system. So depend on which one you want to use, right? So the S of it using Python, because of the large extensive libraries that it has, you can be able to design intelligent robots, right? Intelligent AI robots easily without stress because it has a built-in fast libraries. So for the web, we have three popular frameworks, which is the Flash framework, Django framework, and the Fast API. We also have so many other frameworks, right? But these are the three popular ones that we actually use. So now introduction to data structure. So a data structure is a way of organizing your data, right? It's a systematic way of organizing and managing and storing data so that it can be easily accessed and modified efficiently. And that is one of the core scope of what we're going to do in the next class, in a practical class, right? We're going to learn data structure, and the data structure we're going to learn here is, although we have four, which we're supposed to learn, which is the list, tuple, dictionary, and set, but we'll focus mainly on the list, the tuple, and the dictionary. So you can see that list is ordered, right? Is mutable. Why we say is mutable is that we can be able to alter the list, we can be able to change, we can be able to delete the list, like collections of items. It's a mutable collection of items. We can store multiple items in a single variable, right? So definitely when we'll be solving our problems, this we need this. So tuple is ordered and immutable collection of items, meaning that once it's created, we can't alter it, right? Once it's closed, we can't alter it, right? But it's also the collection of items. So once you create, you cannot modify them. You can see it. So dictionary is an ordered collection of key value pairs, which we're going to see. So the key must be unique and immutable. It means that you can't alter the key, but you can actually alter the values, right? Y values can be of any types, right? You can alter the values, you can update the values, you can delete the values, right? So by default, let's go to, let me just explain here. Okay, let's look at list here, right? So list and tuples and dictionaries, right? Do all the indexes start from index 0, right? Down to the last index, which is minus 1, right? Minus 1. So this is an example of a list, right? So these are elements, or we can call them the items, like 99. 99 is in index 0, 44 is in index 1, 34 is in index 2, 68 is in index 3, and 100 is in index minus 1, which is the last index, or in the index 4, right? So we're not going to look at the practicals here, but in next class, we're going to see how we can be able to define this list, define the tuples, define the dictionaries, and also to manipulate them, right? So this is an example of a tuple. We can see a list, a tuple can take any data type. A list and a tuple can take any data type, right? So you can see this example of a tuple here, right? We have two data type here, which is string and the integer, right? Although in this list here we have all as whole numbers, which are the integers, but that doesn't mean that it can't take any data type. It can. It can take mix of data type, or we can have an integer here, we can have a string here, we can have a boolean here, or we can also have a float here. So now this is a dictionary. The last one you can see, this one here is a dictionary which is made up of key value pairs, right? Now this key is immutable, right? You can't change them, right? So by default, a key holds just one value, right? Hold on. Let me give an example. Assuming key one here is a name, right? So this name holds a value called Alice. Alice is a name, right? Alice is a name. So let's see if you want your dictionary to hold more names, right? On the one that for if you want a key to hold more names, what you need to do there, a good example to be able to use to integrate to this is by using list, right? Because we can actually change that, we can actually manipulate that. So once a list is here, a list can be able to hold Alice, can be able to hold John, can be able to hold Peter, and so on and so forth. And that's what we're going to learn in the next class, right? So the same thing applies. Let's say key two is the age, right? The age, we hold the age of Alice. So key three is the work experience. No, let's use marital statue. So marital statue, we hold the statues of Alice and other names or other objects, right? So now we have understood the list, we have understood the tuples, we have understood the dictionary, right? So in our next class, we're going to look at how we're going to solve some basic problems, and I'm going to teach you guys algorithms so that you can be able to write your algorithms, because the main purpose of this class is my code and your code, my instruction and your instruction may be different, but we're all arriving at the same answer, right? I'm going to teach you how to optimize your code or unoptimize your code, but we all arrive at the same answer, right? The only difference is that is the time complexity, right, which I'm going to still expose to you guys, even if this class is not a fully data structure class. But we're going to learn all these practicals so that you can be able to understand how to code efficiently. I hope you understand this lecture. So for every slide, always look at the assessment question. You can see the assessment questions here. The first one is, what is programming language, right? Which we have explained, to explain the classes of programming language with examples. What is a variable and data type, which we have learned here in this class. So what is an IDE and a framework, so which we have learned. Explain one popular framework for web application, which is a model view controller, which I've explained. So what is the difference between the implicit and the explicit data type declaration, and give one example each of the programming language that uses the explicit data type declaration and the programming language that uses the implicit. Now here, one of the programming language that uses the implicit is the Python. So the explicit, we have Java, C Sharp, right? Java, C Sharp, C++, C uses the explicit right way. So explain the list, tuples, dictionary, right, and sets, right. So these are all the things we've learned in lesson one. In lesson two, we're going to look at the controls, right, and also we're going to look at data structure. I hope you understand this lecture. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Thank you, and God bless you.